Hey everybody, my name is Devin, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a rabbit hole, and we're going to go down it together because the outcome is not going to be what you think that it is. And so to do that, we got to dive in. All right, so the first thing I want you to see is that a few days ago there was a attempt assassination attempt that was done. And right after that had happened, people then knew the name of the person and they searched all over the internet, in essence, looking for information that had to do with this guy's name. And one of the things that came up is this account. And this account is by Henry Martinez. And it has one post and the only post on this whole entire account, and it happens to be Cole Allen, which was the actual guy's name, right? Now, this post was made December 21st, 2023. So in 2023, which as you know, you cannot change this information at all after a post has been made. So in 2023, a guy actually wrote the name of the shooter from the attempted assassination. Okay. So that is very interesting. The account was actually created December 2023, joined December 2023. So that is very interesting because this account was created in the month. It might even be the day, we're not sure, but created in the month of the year. And then it ends up having one post that was made on December 21st that happens to have a name of a guy who ended up basically attempting to shoot at the dinner that just happened a few days ago in 2026. Now, on top of that, you will also notice that the image here is Pepe the Frog. If you don't know what that means, it means that in 2016, Pepe the Frog became the number one front end image for Donald Trump. And so even Hillary Clinton claimed that she was going against Pepe the Frog and the right, the alt-right. And so at that time, this is what represented Trump. Now, at the dinner, he wore a bow tie as well as tux, and that is what the frog is wearing in this. But to go even further, you have the background here. So the background, someone ended up looking up, and it actually is called Time Machine. And so somebody then basically took this image, placed it on this, and started to play around a little bit and notice something that popped up, which is that if you place the last attempted one, you end up with this overlay here of the same. So what you will see here, and I will point out, is that you can always see faces and things. That is something that we're designed to see patterns. So I don't pay attention much to faces, although they are pretty decent on here. But the one that I like is this extension right here, is that when you're actually looking at this image, it can't have something that stands out. So in other words, if this was a sky with a few clouds, it would have to align with that actual cloud. And so it is kind of interesting how it does align with the fist. Again, just a rabbit hole. That is all that this is. But the one that stood out to me the most is when you go back and you look, I'm all about numbers, right? So if you go back and you look, so 12th, 21 is going to end up being the solstice, the winter solstice. This is also correlated to Fibonacci and a lot of other numbers. In other words, if you end up taking the 1221 and divide it by 888, 888 being Jesus in Greek gematria, you end up with 137.5 degrees, which is the golden angle of creation, basically. So these are just numbers that stood out. But the one that really stood out to me was the last four on this, which is 1893. So 1893 is where it really gets interesting because there was a book that was written in 1893 that is actually called The Marvelous Adventures of Baron Trump. And this storyline is about a boy named Baron, and he goes on these adventures, and his mentor, and he's time traveling, and his mentor's name is Don. And then after all of these things end up happening, the guy who actually wrote this ended up writing a book called The Last President. And in that book, the book opens up with a president on Fifth Avenue with all these protesters who were very upset because nobody saw this president actually winning. It was this, astronomical event. And then when he ended up winning, the people were protesting, and the running mate of this president's name was actually Pence, just spelled differently, Peynce versus how Pence spells his name. So it was really interesting that, in 1893, this book was written that talks about these key things, time travel, and then also talks about, the last president in essence. And that's where when you hear people talk about the last president, that's what they're really talking about. They're talking about this book. So there are two children's books, The Marvelous Adventures of Baron Trump and then The Underground Adventures of Baron Trump, both with Don as the mentor in that. And there's a lot of other correlations if you decide to pick it up. But the guy who actually wrote this, another cool connection is that Nikola Tesla and him both lived in New York, both attended the same dinners, the same restaurants, the same barber, those type of things, basically the circles, because Integer Lockwell was all about, building and contracts and different things like that. And then you had, and obviously writing, and then you had Nikola Tesla that was a celebrity at that time. And so they would have crossed paths numerous times, but there's nothing that's actually been written about it. So why am I telling you all this? Well, I'm telling you all this because the conclusion that people are coming to is time travel, right? How would you have been able to change something on social media like that you can't change? How would you have known that this name would have mattered to actually write it just once? How would all these things have been connected? And then to add another layer, you also then have a connection. So Henry Martinez, the person who actually made this account, ended up working for Lockheed Martin Space Systems as well as NASA. Okay. So the guy who basically created this worked for NASA as well at Lockheed, ends up writing a name of a guy that we wouldn't have known anything about until a few days ago, but he wrote that post December 21st, 2023, and the last four on the number here end up correlating you to 1983, which is a book that is written about this guy, or at least mentioned, with his son, that is also then the last president, that is also then the understanding of time travel. So, what are we really talking about? Well, if we're talking about time travel in terms of getting into a ship, going back in time, changing something, the answer is no. And here's the reason. If you take it from an energy standpoint, it is very simple to understand that if you want to change one thing in time, you're going against a massive amount of energy. So if you change something in that time, what would end up happening? It would self-correct. So even if you changed a minute or an hour in time, within the next hour, everything will be right back the way it is, and you still got the outcome you wanted. Therefore, never actually changing time. If you take that from a energetic personal standpoint, there are far more people who do not want you to change time than there is people that want to change time. So in other words, if you were to go back and change one moment and that would cause, let's say, a million people not to be born, those million people's energetic energy would stop you from being able to actually change anything. Einstein did a really good job of basically saying if time travel was true, then he wrote himself a letter, he planned a dinner, and he said and invited himself to show up because he figures that if it was actually true, then it would be something you'd go back in the past and do, which means it would bring you to the present, which means he would have appeared. And of course, never showed up at that time. So the idea behind this is that that won't hold up as well. And then, of course, you have just the general understanding of physics, our understanding of physics, not being able to do it. So that opens a door to there's only one other option for time travel, and that means that you can travel in mind and not travel in physicality. Now, if you can travel in mind and not travel in physicality, this could answer a lot of questions. This could answer first and foremost what different people were talking about when they were talking about receiving messages. Einstein, Nikola Tesla, um, Pythagoras, I mean, they keep going and they basically said that they had received information that they didn't know that was outside of them. There are famous people, Bach, Beethoven, they talk about the music that came to them, not that they created music. So, where did those messages come from? Well, if they come from the future, that would make a lot of sense. You saw the future, you saw something, you gave yourself basically a moment in time that you could look back on and say, I changed something. So that'd be the exact same thing. If this guy was able to go to the future, to see the future, to not be happy with the future, he could go back in his mind to this date, leave this message. So, in other words, himself types this message, doesn't know why he types it, continues living his life. He's obviously back in the present, living his life. So that's an option in the idea that you can time travel in your mind. And if you could try time travel in your mind, you could affect something like, for instance, writing this message without affecting everything. In other words, it changes the butterfly effect because what happened always actually happened. And so, therefore, it would be no different than the present that you're actually in, which is how we all are now Googling and seeing this and going, nothing changed. It still happened. It was still something that didn't get complete, and the post is still there. So, the reason I'm talking about this is because of the fact that when you're receiving downloads, I think it would be important to ask yourself a question. Am I receiving this from myself in the future? Am I receiving this from something external me from the future? Or am I receiving this from something in the present, right? If it's in the present, then you have to define it. Is it God? Is it Jesus? Is it, anything along those lines? If it's from the future, you also have to define it. Is it God predicting your life, which then leads you to feel very uncomfortable with the fact that your life is predestined? Is it you from the future looking at something that could happen, coming back to a moment to show you life is not predestined, that you actually can change things? It's completely up to you. But I love things like this, and I'm going to continue kind of exploring different things with you guys because I don't want you to stay away from steganography. I don't want you to stay away from being able to see the deeper meanings underneath the dirt because the truth is not at the surface. It's under the dirt. Anything that you want to actually learn is not going to be just laying there on the floor. You've got to actually put in some effort to look for it. And that's why it's called a rabbit hole, is because if you literally feel like you're in a hole, that never stops and you just keep going. The moment you bring awareness to a rabbit hole, you know it stops. You know that it has to stop because no rabbit just dug forever. So there's going to be a place it's going to stop, and there's going to be a place that now you can explore. So it's just changing your mindset. And it's the same thing with time travel. Stop thinking time travel is not possible. Just stop thinking about it from one mindset and look at it another, because either way you view it, it answers how this is actually possible, how it's happening before your eyes without believing that it's some voodoo magic or it's just a coincidence. All right. Explore, bring back that childhood like excitement about learning these different things, because that is how we're going to change this slope. And that is exactly what I was telling you guys, is that we have too many questions and not enough experience. So don't be afraid to look at things. And I'm going to do the best I can to kind of show you some things that, yeah, the world is saying are darker, but they're not as dark as you think. And more importantly, they reveal to you how powerful you actually are. All right, get your nine vibes aligned.